Welcome to episode 14 of The Rational Homer. I am your host, Kyle, and Andy will be joining us today to discuss the final major of the PGA Tour season, along with some athletic director discussions around Iowa State's uh, announcement that Jamie Pollard will be retiring next year. And then I'll discuss a little bit of baseball, as this week is the All-Star break, and the Cubs in the first half was rather hot, which kind of just continued the story of their first half of the season of being hot then not and hot then not. As they only are 5 games behind the Brewers. Welcome back, Andrew, as we're here to talk about the Open Championship, the fourth and final major of the 2026 PGA Tour golf season. Pretty interesting week as it's been over in Europe. That pretty early tee times for us. We got Mr. Jordan Spieth teeing off at 4:09 on Thursday, and he's playing with Tommy Fleetwood and John Rahm. What are your thoughts on Spieth going into this week?
Well, thanks for having me again, and thank you for leading with Jordan Spieth for the final major of the season. Just a fun fact on him that last time Royal Birkdale hosted this tournament in 2017, Sir Jordan Spieth was the winner. So maybe we get some magic again.
Was
We
that
don't
the
need
last?
to
Was that the last time he won a PGA tournament event?
know, but it was his last major. So yeah, we don't need to go into that, and we don't need to talk about how he almost missed the cut at the John Deere and got like basically like almost last place, things like that. So we're not really trending game wise, but you never know. That's why they play. But I like his pairing, Tommy Fleetwood. I'm a fan of him. I don't really like John Rahm, but he's usually kind of like all or nothing, so at least it'll be entertaining to watch.
Yeah, and John Rahm's kind of been having a down year, at least in the majors. But hopefully he can be a little bit more competitive in this one. But before teeing off before them is probably arguably one of the best groups of the day would be Scotty Scheffler, Tyrell Hatton, and then Bryson DeChambeau.
Yeah, I love that group because Scotty obviously isn't like super dramatic on the course, but he's very good, so it's fun to watch. And then both Bryson and Terrell Hatton are kind of known for just crazy things happening. They can go super low, but they also can just like blow up, and both are equally entertaining. So I think that might be one of the best groups to watch, if not the best group.
Yes, that will be teeing off at 3:58 a.m. Probably a little bit early for me, but maybe I'll catch their back nine or something, depending upon how slow the first day is. Other good matchups, or other good pairings, I guess. We have Colin Morikawa, JJ Spawn, and Nikolai Hojgaard at 8:42 a.m. I'm a fan of Colin Morikawa, and I don't know, hopefully he puts on a good showing for us.
Yeah, I like him too. I feel like he's easy to root for. Had really good success a few years ago. Feels like he's like kind of right there. Had some injuries, but I always like watching him. The other two, I don't mind, but they're not as much star power.
Yeah, and then two other decent pairings. We got Shane Lowry and Ryan Blitzkepka at 8:53 Central Time, and then the other pairing is Rory McIlroy, Xander Schauffele, and Matt Fitzgerald. Fitzpatrick. So
Yeah, I think those are both really good too. I always love watching Rory when he's back in Europe because I feel like he just plays links golf really well. My Fitzpatrick guy, I feel like he's just steady and easy to watch. And Brooks is always going to get eyeballs. So those are a couple good groups. What, they're late in the morning, right?
yeah, they're 8:53 and 9:15, so Central Time. So those will be about the time, and you'll probably be already off to work, but I'll probably be just getting up around those times. I always enjoy watching Rory as well. I kind of like Aaron Rye a little bit. He's kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, he is.
And Xander Schauffele always seems to be pretty consistent, at least near the top.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mention him, but I like Xander. Nothing against him, just not one of my top favorites.
Yes. And then, who are you looking at that you think could potentially win this tournament, or who is your pick to win this tournament?
You know, I always find it hard to root against or pick against some of like the hometown guys like a Rory or Fitzpatrick, even like a Shane Lowry or Robert McIntyre, or I guess throwing Fleetwood too. Basically, all guys from over there. But I like this is a no. I'm actually gonna go outside the box. I was gonna say like Rory Give me Robert McIntyre. That's a crazy pick, but I do feel like he's really good at the link style courses, and he had a good showing last week or this past weekend at the Scottish Open. So, um, yeah, I'll go outside the box there and choose him, McIntyre.
McIntyre. Okay. So
If
then,
not Jordan Spieth, of course.
well, I mean, I think we can kind of hope on a win and a prayer on that one, Madden. But
Okay, wait, before you go, let me give you some of the odds for the betting odds. Scotty's first, Rory second, Fleetwood third, Fitzpatrick fourth, John Rahm fifth. Are you taking any of those?
I think I'm gonna go with Fitzpatrick. I've been watching him, and when I watched golf this year, and I just kind of feel like you said, kind of the home course feeling. I think he does well, and I like Fitzpatrick. I don't know, just a certain feeling about that one.
I of those top five, just not going Rory or Scotty. I do like that pick. McIntyre looks like he's like top 15 odds wise. So maybe that's just a better like long shot at 36 to 1. But yeah, I like that pick.
And then there's not too much. I also, as another thing we should talk about, in past years it's always been the John Deere Classic right before the final major, and that has now changed, which I do not like that at all. But just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I it's kind of like you said, it's just like familiarity that felt a little odd that it wasn't that way anymore. But I feel like with all the PGA Tour like upcoming changes, nothing's gonna surprise me anymore, especially as we get into next year with that kind of two-tier system with the top like kind of signature events and majors, and then almost like a elevated Corn Ferry Tour, but still being like the PGA. So I feel like scheduling's gonna start to be different. Maybe not like super different, but it's better to just be prepared that it's not what you're used to.
Yeah, yeah, and for some people this might be the last hurrah in the top tier. Not gonna name any specific names about that one, but
Yeah, we won't talk about that. We won't talk about that.
just kind of enjoy the ride while it lasts. Let's just say that.
Well, maybe Jordan wins the Open this week or the 3M Open in Minneapolis next week for the first time ever, maybe with me in attendance. So, hey, he's got some chances to get his career back on track.
How old is he?
He's like 32.
Hmm.
So maybe like 5 more good years. Well, if you could call it good right now.
Yeah, 5 more years of being relevant. I mean, the 3 mil tournament in Minneapolis seemed extremely excited about having him, which is always good. And I think Scheffler's playing in that too, right?
Yep. And they just got Tom Kim to commit, who won the Scottish Open this weekend. So actually will be a decent turnout.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
How about on a totally different note, what did you think of the Jamie Pollard news?
Jamie Pollard retiring. I think it's a good thing, depending upon who they get. It's obviously going to be a really important decision with the whole NIL era, and they need somebody that knows business and sponsorships. And I think it's a good thing he's retiring. He did start to change a little bit, allowing alcohol sales this year in Hilton and Jack Trice this upcoming season. But I think that's also a little too late scenario where that should have been done long ago. And as the Iowa State Athletics is in major debt, definitely going to need somebody that can at least keep them afloat and keep the basketball program as one of the top 10 teams in the nation and keep the football program being at Iowa every year. So,
Okay. I do think just off my personal fan experience, like Iowa obviously got rid of Barta a couple years ago and it's been working out so far. And Kentucky had, well, it was probably their best AD for like past 20 to 25 years, but these last few years, he's kind of been like Pollard, like doesn't want to change at all, like just falling behind in NIL. I think it's interesting that you have a guy, and that Mitch Barnhart's his name, but you get a guy like him and now Pollard, who they're technically successful ADs, but like towards the end of their career in this new change, when they're not quick enough to change, you're kind of seeing maybe this new wave of athletic directors going to start coming in just because, like you said, it's all about like fundraising, who can run a program that's not in debt, and it'll be interesting to see who they get.
yeah, and I know there's a couple of rumors of, I think it's the North Dakota, somebody in the North Dakota athletic office, just because of the connection to Jimmy Rogers, and I believe TJ was also there. The interesting thing that I'm more interested in with this retirement, which we're still going to be waiting another entire year, is if any more reports will drop about if that was the reason Campbell left, things like that. I'm very intrigued because once he retires, not that people are going to be, crapping on him or telling bad stories about him, but they'll be allowed to be a bit more free about the situation, I think.
Right, you're gonna get a lot more people giving details about behind the scenes during his tenure, and it. I don't know. You would know this better than me because I haven't really read into like the message boards or anything. But is he retiring, or is it kind of like you have to retire?
I think he's retiring based on what I've seen.
Well, that at least seems because I feel like from an outsider, I've always heard in the last few years, like Iowa State fans certainly complain about him to a certain extent.
Yeah, and I think that mostly came from the NIL and the message boards and not allowing alcohol sales in the stadium. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. Just Jamie Pollard. I mean, I saw a stat on Twitter the other week of kind of like what Iowa State had money-wise when he started there in 2005 versus now, and they are. They do have higher attendance, they have more employees, they have a larger budget. So he's done very well with what he started with. But at the same time, how much more could have it potentially been had we been more open to like selling alcohol in the stadiums and other things that maybe Matt Campbell's still there. Who knows? And I saw who was it, Jeff Goodman? Is that who it is?
Yeah, yeah.
Tweet tweeted out how TJ is, well, no, this means TJ might get poached, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's just lack of awareness of, I don't know, people don't understand TJ and his love for Iowa State. And yeah, Pollard was a big part of that because he got him the job, he was the one that hired him at Iowa State and kind of gave him the start at Iowa State. But when you like a school through and through, the changing of the athletic director, that's also probably going to allow him more flexibility with NIL because they're probably going to allow TJ and like Jimmy Rogers to now control their own collective, whereas everything before was going through Jamie Pollard. I think that will make the coaches a lot more happy. It'll be a lot easier for them to do their job and get the players they want.
Right. And I feel like sometimes a guy like Jeff Goodman, the national people, they try to say things that are going to get him like the most like attention and engagement because, yeah, that's clearly not like having a finger on the pulse of TJ and his history with Iowa State. And I will say, part of me would be hesitant at any program to like hire the new athletic director based on who their football and basketball coaches want, even if they're like amazing coaches. But I do think the positive would be that you would have to think TJ and Jimmy Rogers are going to have a say in who the next candidate or candidate pool is, which is only going to help them want to stay around.
Yeah, and if they get help in the decision-making process or get to give their input on what they're looking for, and the president helps meet those needs with potential candidates, I think I'm not too worried about the new athletic director situation, but again, that's just me as a fan, and I kind of just think everything will be okay. I don't crash and burn like after watching the Jordan Spieth round. I'm just kind of even keel until things go bad.
I could learn a little bit from that, but yes, that is good. I do kind of agree with athletic directors. Sometimes I feel like people freak out, and it's like yeah, they're extremely important, especially if you have hires upcoming and you need to have someone who can fundraise. But sometimes I think people are just like the sky is falling.
Yeah, and I don't think that's the case. I do think it's still highly crucial and important, but at the same time, you have to trust the board at Iowa State that they're gonna, you know, do the right process and hire the right candidate that best fit what they need going forward over these next, hopefully another 20-25 year run from an athletic director.
Right, exactly. And I think honestly, it's a good time for schools if they've had older long-term athletic directors, if they hadn't reinvented themselves about 3, 4 years ago and proven that what they're doing is working even better now, then it is time to get kind of that new wave of people in who are gonna just totally embrace the NIL era.
Well, yeah, and then you look at the flip side of that, and you got Michigan potentially firing their athletic director after those slew of investigations from Jim Harbaugh to Sherman Moore to Juwan Howard. So Iowa State could be in that situation, which we definitely don't want to be. So it's kind of like, yeah, Pollard, there are some things we really didn't like about him, but when you're making comparisons here, overall, he did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I agree. I think he had a great career. And then maybe it's just these last couple few years, they're watching how he's been adapting or not. And then maybe both parties were kind of like a new kind of era or new blood is going to be what's best.
Yeah, and I think hopefully, hopefully that works out, and only time will tell on that. But I would assume they'll what they announced Beth gets fairly, at least fairly prior to before she was hired, right?
Yeah, that it was kind of known. And so I wonder when or if Iowa State will formally, like,
Announced, yeah.
you're right. Or if it'll just kind of be like known but unofficially. And then once he retires, or maybe a month ahead or something, they'll, because you need to have someone kind of ramping up.
Yeah, you have somebody at least, maybe not shadow Pollard around, but, have conversations with Pollard and kind of see, what it's like. Get to know the people in the office and things like that.
Yep.
Any other topics you need to discuss, Mr. Andrew, while you're on the road returning from your golf tournament?
Well, my Yankees are terrible, so I'm kind of just ignoring them and talk to me in hopefully September when the postseason begins.
What about the Bears and the
I mean, I think it's crazy that NFL preseason's only a few weeks away, but my only worry with the Bears is they're going to have a first place schedule. So I feel like it might be kind of a grind this year. Not that they couldn't make the playoffs, especially like a wild card or something, but I don't know. I feel like expectations are going to show if this kind of
if Caleb Williams is who we think he is, type thing?
right. If the Caleb Ben combo is going to be like, all right, legit, this next decade, you're going to have a team that's always playoff, like hopeful or good enough to be in the playoffs? Or is it kind of like, there's a little bit of luck there, which there was, but is he still like ascending or is kind of just what we saw, the luckiest, best version of him? I don't think that, but like with how many fourth quarter comebacks there were, like you can't just expect that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a team like the Minnesota Vikings when they had, Captain Kirk, and he had all those fourth quarter comebacks that one year. The next year, they hardly had any at all. And that's just kind of the nature of the beast in the NFL is sometimes you're going to get all the breaks, and then the next year you might get none of the breaks, and you're stuck home sitting on the couch come January when the playoffs roll around.
Right. I'm just hoping that maybe we only get 50% of those breaks at most this year, but we're good enough that our record is still up there to make the postseason.
Yeah.
But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little worried because, yeah, the way they do the scheduling and all that, it's not going to be easy.
Yeah, and the bottom teams in the Central are going to get a bit of an easier schedule, and that's kind of nice to have that, especially in a year that maybe like Detroit, who had a down year last year, gets to come back a little bit, and Dan Campbell's the talk of the town again. But
Right. It's like some of the teams like Detroit or even like Joe Burrow and the Bengals are going to get one of the easiest schedules, even though they have the talent. So yeah, it's just a little bit of a advantage that certainly talked about more during the off season, but we'll see what happens when things get going here. Not that far off.
yeah, we will see indeed. Especially since you still don't want to join the fantasy league, but it's okay.
Well, you can keep trying. We still have a few weeks, so maybe I can be persuaded.
Potentially, or maybe you can just join forces with your brother Samoose and
Yeah,
or
there
the
we go.
JV or JV. I don't think Burko would let you on his team, but you could try him too.
Yeah, just I'll latch onto one of them and then they can do all the work, but I can blame them when we lose.
Yeah, then you can look at the stats and stuff, see what other teams have, and things like that. That will do it for our segment with our co-host Andrew, as he enjoys his ride back to his home from his golf tournament. And we will be back next week with Andrew to discuss the Open Championship, and hopefully Jordan Spieth is still, I don't know, kicking, I guess, per se. And
Yeah,
yeah, and
he'll hopefully be a two-time Open champion come this time next week.
over to baseball with the All-Star festivities this week. Jordan Walker beat out Kyle Schwarber in the home run derby finale at Citizens Bank Park as Jordan Walker hit 6 home runs in a row with one swing left. Really like Schwarber. Jordan Walker is having a great year, or a better year than what he's used to having. I had him on my fantasy team for a couple years. and he just never really figured it out. But this year he's figured it out a bit. And of course, I don't have a runner fantasy team. So that's just the way it goes with him. Then with the All-Star game as well. The American League won again, which is no surprise to anybody. And the American League typically wins the All-Star game. I would say the disappointing part is the National League got shut out, which is really tough to see, but what can you do there? I'm looking over to the standings here. We got Tampa Bay is in first, up 3 games. American League East, Tampa Bay is in first, up 3 games on the Yankees. Tampa Bay is a very solid team. Um, Again, not really any super big name players. They got Caminero, who has I think 23 home runs or something like that. He's pretty good. They're up on the Yankees by 3 games. I would expect the Yankees, once they get healthy in the second half, to get Stanton back. To get Judge back, their offense will be better. I would assume the Yankees will end up winning the division, but Tampa Bay is just kind of one of those small market teams that doesn't have a lot of people that are known, but they play together as a team and they get the job done. Outside of that, the AL East, they pretty much right off Boston. Baltimore and Toronto, they're all double-digit games back. Boston fired their manager earlier in the year. They are on a 9-game winning streak, Boston is, but other than that, not a whole lot going for them. Baltimore's on a 4-game winning streak, but they just don't have the pitching or really the offense. And Toronto was the most surprising team because I thought they were going to be competitive with the Dylan Cease signing, and they weren't. And that's probably been the most surprising thing about the AL East this season so far. The NL Central, the White Sox and Guardians are tied in first place. Great to see the White Sox competing for a division title at the halfway point of what we consider the regular season. The Twins are only 3 games back. They can still be competitive depending upon what kind of moves they make. Their run differential is negative 14, which is interesting. The Tigers are 6.5 back, so while they're still not out of it, rumors of them trading Skubal is among us, and we will see what happens there. I have a feeling they probably will end up trading Skubal, just because it doesn't seem like they're going to agree. He's been battling injuries, and they kind of want to get value for him while they can. They just don't seem like they're going to be really super competitive. I mean, you can always be competitive in the AL Central, but beyond the AL Central, like getting the playoffs and not winning, I think winning the first, even the wild card set would be difficult for them. And moving over to the AL West, we have the Rangers in first place, up a game and a half on the Mariners. Rangers are 2 games above 500 at 49 and 47. Mostly their pitching is doing well. The Mariners deployed an interesting strategy before the All-Star break, where their starters would be piggybacking, which is where one starter comes in and then another starter comes in after that. So they're not pitching essentially they're not pitching full games, they're like each pitching like 4 innings, which is a very interesting strategy. They went 4-6 to end their break games. And before the break, and the Astros are only 3 games back, and they could make a run if they get healthy as well. Athletics are 8 back, the Angels are 11.5 back. The Athletics have lost 9 in a row, which is crazy to think they were leading the division, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, and now since they lost 9 in a row, they just kind of fallen off the earth. I expect the division to come down between the Rangers, Mariners, and Astros, and the Athletics just aren't quite there yet with their pitching, I don't think. Then the Angels are the Angels. A new manager, Kurt Suzuki, not really fully developed there yet, but we may see them call up some young talent early in the second half, just to get them some playing time. And moving over to the National League, got the Braves in first place, 2 games up on the Phillies. The Braves are 55 and 40. The Phillies are 54 and 43. And the Miami Marlins are only 4 games back as well of the Braves. And I think the Phillies end up winning this division somehow, just with the hiring of Don Mattingly and such a drastic turnaround they've had as their offense started hitting. And I don't know if I really blame last manager, Rob Thompson, for their struggles, but their offense just wasn't hitting. And when you're not hitting with runners in scoring position, it can be a very downward trend, as the Cubs saw that during multiple stretches of their first half of the season. I like the Marlins team, though. They played well in the month of June. I believe had the best record in the month of June. Young team, a lot of young players. Always have young starters that are really good, even though they end up getting traded because eventually they need a contract. Yuri Perez, Max Meyer, Sandy Alcantara, I guess. Yeah. So yeah, I really like the Marlins, another small market team. And then moving over to the Nationals, they're 8 games back of the Braves. I would kind of consider them out of it. They just don't have the bullpen. The back end of their bullpen is awful. I believe they have the most blown saves in baseball. Then at the bottom of the division, we have the Mets, who are 16 games back, and I mean they have a lot of good talent. They just can't seem to put it together, and their pitching isn't that great. Their offense is very inconsistent. I would definitely consider them eliminated from playoff contention. And moving over to the NL Central, we have the Brewers in first place at 59 and 37. And the Cubs are 54 and 42. The Cubs are 5 games back of the Brewers. The Cubs season, very interesting so far with their winning streak, losing streak, winning streak, losing streak. And then they finally, I believe they went 15 and 4 over the final stretch before the All-Star break, which is really good for them to get within 5 games. 5 games of striking distance. I'd say if they were, 9 to 10 games behind the Brewers, that's a little too much to make up, even with as much as they play them in the second half. The Brewers are just such a solid squad with Christian Yelich and Bryce Strang, William Contreras, Jacob Mizorowski, arguably the best pitcher in baseball right now that can throw 105. Always Aaron Ashby out of the bullpen, solid lefty to kind of eat up those middle innings, get him out of tight situations. And then moving down to St. Louis, who was 8.5 back, a very young team, was in contention there for a bit early in the year, but now I think they're starting to slip a little bit. Their pitching is young as well, and their bullpen is pretty experienced, but their offense is struggling at times here now, and I just don't think they have the bullpen unless they make multiple acquisitions and starters as well. I think they need another starter or two unless they would want to be competitive with the Brewers, but honestly, I don't think anybody's going to catch the Brewers. The Cubs could by chance, but they would have to stay consistently hot. They can't do this hot, cold, 10-game winning streak, 10-game losing streak, and just stay intermittent there. Because the Brewers aren't going to have a 10-game losing streak. I would be surprised if the Brewers had more than a 5-game losing streak. Pittsburgh is 9.5 back. They're pretty much out of it. Paul Skeens was not what he used to be offensively. O'Neal Cruz is having a pretty good year. Other than that, not too much to talk about on the Pirates. Then the Reds are 15.5 back. They're really struggling. Pitching struggling, offense struggling. Eugenio Suarez got injured. Not really hitting home runs like he's supposed to. Just kind of a bad combination for them. They've been rotating outfielders for most of the season, and they just don't consistently have an offense. And that shows as they're the only team with a negative run differential in the NL Central, and the only team below 500 in the NL Central. Moving over to the West, the Dodgers are 61 and 36, which is by far the best record in baseball over Tampa Bay. The Dodgers are the Dodgers. They have a plus 149 run differential. Freeman, Betts, Ohtani, although Ohtani's hurt now. You can pretty much name anybody you want on their team, and they're playing a pretty good season. The Diamondbacks are 11.5 back. Padres are 12.5 back, and then obviously the Giants and the Rockies are all out of it. All those teams I just listed have negative run differentials. The Padres, I thought were maybe going to be competitive with them a little bit. They are not, and that's kind of disappointing, but at the same time, a couple years ago when they traded for Juan Soto, and then that didn't really pan out to compete with the Dodgers. I just think the Dodgers have far too many All-Stars to really be challenged in that division. I think the best bet to beat the Dodgers is probably a team like the Phillies with their offense and the back end of the bullpen, but hopefully we will see that in the playoffs. I'm going back to the Cubs for a second, and the resurgence, the hot streak that the Cubs kind of put together to head up to the All-Star break was kind of led by Pete Crow Armstrong, as he got moved to the leadoff spot, and he got extremely hot and has the best wins above replacement in baseball, which is kind of a defensive statistic, but a very important stat. Other than that, not a whole lot of Cubs are doing a lot. Carson Skelly's still doing pretty decent. He didn't have to struggle down the stretch here. As Seihei Suzuki is doing well. But I mean, Pete Crow Armstrong was hitting the 240s. He got his average up to 291. He has 21 home runs, 53 RBIs, and a whopping, I believe it's 20 stolen bases. So there's that. Dansby Swanson also had like a 2 to 3 week stretch where he was just hitting home runs. He like tripled his RBI total. That was pretty insane. But it'll be interesting to watch the Cubs the second half, see what kind of moves they make at the deadline. And then the deadline will be coming up here in about, I think, 16 days roughly. But next week, talking about next week's episode, Andrew and I will talk about the Open Championship results and if he's in a good headspace with how Jordan Spieth has played. I'll probably talk football a little bit, and we'll probably get into baseball again. And as the rumors will be seen, sometimes there's always this big trade splash before the deadline. But be sure to tune in next week to another episode with me and my co-host, Andrew. And remember, if you have any questions or comments or suggestions for sports-related content you'd like me to react to, send an email to rationalhomer@gmail.com.